Somewhere right now, someone is turning off notifications on their birthday. They're letting the calls go to voicemail. Their friends made a group chat. They haven't opened it. You probably know someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. Everyone assumes it's sadness, but the real answer is far stranger, and it has almost nothing to do with being sad at all. Start with the obvious question. Why does a birthday matter to anyone in the first place? It's just a rotation of the Earth. Nothing about your body changes at midnight. Your cells don't know the date, and yet, for some people, that date carries enormous emotional weight, while for others, it might as well not exist. That gap is not random. It's wired into how your brain handles time, identity, and the one thing it works hardest to avoid thinking about. Here's where it gets strange. Birthdays, as a personal celebration, are a remarkably recent invention. For most of human history, nobody knew their exact birth date. Ancient farming communities tracked seasons, harvests, floods, not days of individual birth. Historian Elizabeth Pleck has traced how the modern birthday party, cake and candles and all, only became a common household ritual in the West during the 19th century, tied to the rise of the middle class and its new obsession with childhood as a distinct life stage. Before that, your age was a vague guess, not a number you celebrated. Go back further, and it gets even stranger. In many ancient societies, tracking an individual's exact age simply wasn't useful information. What mattered was your role, whether you could plant, hunt, marry, fight, or lead. Anthropologists studying pre-industrial societies have long noted that age was often measured in life stages rather than years, child, adolescent, adult, elder, not in a precise count of birthdays passed. Some cultures, including parts of historical Korea and China, use systems where everyone in the community aged up together on a single shared new year, regardless of their actual birth date. Your personal birthday wasn't a special day at all. It was just one day among the groups. So the emotional charge you feel around birthdays isn't ancient, it's cultural. Which means the people who feel nothing on their birthday aren't broken. They're just less wired into a script that's only a couple hundred years old, and that script was never universal to begin with. But underneath that recent tradition is something much older, something your brain has been doing for a very long time. And that's where psychologists started paying close attention. In the 1980s, three researchers, Sheldon Solomon, Jeff Greenberg, and Tom Pischinsky, built on the work of anthropologist Ernest Becker to test a theory that sounds almost too simple. They called it terror management theory. The idea is this: humans are the only animal that fully understands it will die. That knowledge creates a low hum of existential dread running underneath everyday life. To manage it, your mind builds buffers: culture, achievement, legacy, relationships. Anything that makes you feel like part of something bigger than a body that ends. A birthday without meaning to punctures that buffer. It's a public, unavoidable reminder that another year of the countdown just passed. In their experiments, Solomon and his colleagues found that when people were reminded of their own mortality, even briefly, they clung harder to their identities, their beliefs, their group memberships. They needed the buffer more. One of their most famous studies involved municipal court judges. Researchers asked half the judges to think briefly about their own death before setting bail for a hypothetical defendant. The other half were not primed with mortality at all. The judges, who had been reminded of death, set bail nearly 9 times higher on average. 9 times. A fleeting thought about their own mortality was enough to change a real professional judgment, without the judges even realizing why. If a single passing thought about death can do that to a trained judge, imagine what a yearly, unavoidable, calendar-mandated reminder can do to an ordinary person opening their messages on the morning of their birthday. So what looks like indifference to a birthday might actually be an old defense mechanism doing its job. Some people manage the discomfort by throwing a party, surrounding themselves with people, noise, proof of life. Others manage it by refusing to look at it at all, muting the day until it passes quietly. Both are the same nervous system, reacting in opposite directions. Now here's the twist nobody expects. Not caring about your birthday isn't always about fearing death. Sometimes it's about something almost the reverse. It's about your relationship with your own future. Psychologist Hal Hershfield at UCLA has spent years studying something called future self-continuity. Using brain imaging, his research found that when some people think about their future self, 10 or 20 years down the line, their brain activity looks almost identical to when they think about a stranger. Not a slightly older version of themselves, an actual stranger, someone unrelated, someone they have no obligation to. For these people, the future self doesn't feel real yet. So celebrating a milestone that marks progress toward it doesn't feel real either. Why celebrate becoming someone you don't yet believe exists? Hershfield went further. In one striking experiment, he had participants interact with age-progressed, digitally aged renderings of their own faces before making decisions about saving money. People who saw their future face, wrinkled, older, unmistakably them, allocated significantly more money toward retirement savings than those who didn't. Just seeing a realistic image of future you was enough to change financial behavior on the spot. The stronger the felt connection to that future face, the more people acted as though that person's well-being actually mattered to them right now. This explains something odd about birthdays. People with weak future self-continuity tend to make short-term decisions across the board. They save less. They plan less. They discount the future heavily in favor of the present. And birthdays, which are essentially a yearly progress report toward a future you, can feel hollow to them, almost like reading a status update about someone else's life. Meanwhile, people with strong future self-continuity often treat birthdays as meaningful checkpoints, because to them, future you is practically sitting in the room already, cake and all. So the birthday isn't really about age, it's a mirror. It reflects how connected you feel to the person you're becoming. There's a third piece to this, and it comes from a very different angle: aging itself. Psychologist Laura Carstensen at Stanford developed what's called socio-emotional selectivity theory, based on decades of research into how people's priorities shift as their sense of time horizon changes. Her studies found something counterintuitive. As people perceive their remaining time as more limited, whether from age, illness, or circumstance, they don't panic. They narrow. They start caring less about expanding their social circle or marking external milestones, and more about deepening the relationships and moments already in front of them. Carstensen's research compared groups across different ages, and even studied people whose sense of time had been artificially shortened, such as those facing serious illness, and found the same pattern regardless of chronological age. It wasn't about how many years someone had lived. It was about how many years they believed they had left. Older adults in her research often reported feeling more emotionally satisfied with life, not less, even as birthdays themselves became less of an event to them. The date stopped mattering. The people in the room mattered more. Put those three findings together, and a strange picture emerges. Someone who doesn't care about their birthday might be quietly managing existential fear, like Solomon's research suggests. Or they might have a disconnected relationship with their future self, like Hershfield found. Or they might have simply reached a stage at any age where Carstensen's narrowing effect has already kicked in, and the ritual itself stopped feeling necessary. Three completely different mechanisms. One identical behavior on the outside, which means the people around them are almost always guessing wrong about why. There's also a much simpler layer sitting on top of all this, and attention. Modern birthdays, especially since social media, have quietly turned into performance reviews. A public tally of who remembered, who posted, who showed up, how many people took 30 seconds out of their day to prove they still think of you. For some people, opting out isn't about death or time horizons at all. It's a rejection of being measured. Research on social comparison, going back to psychologist Leon Festinger's original theory in the 1950s, shows that humans automatically size themselves up against others, constantly and often unconsciously. Later research on social media specifically has found that platforms amplify this comparison enormously. turning ordinary moments into ranked, visible metrics. A birthday, instead of feeling like warmth, can start to feel like an audit, a public scoreboard of how many people showed up for you compared to how many showed up for someone else's post the day before. So indifference becomes armor, not against age, against being watched, counted, and quietly compared. Here's what almost nobody notices, though. The people who claim their birthday is just another day are often the ones who feel time the most intensely, not the least. Caring less about the celebration is frequently a symptom of caring more about what the celebration represents. The armor isn't emptiness, it's overcorrection. There's a cross-cultural angle here too, one that reframes the whole conversation. In many East Asian cultures, milestone birthdays carry heavier symbolic weight than ordinary ones. In Korea, turning 60 traditionally marked the completion of a full cycle of the zodiac calendar and was celebrated as a major life event, while the years in between often passed with far less ceremony. In Japan, certain ages are considered unlucky, and people quietly downplay birthdays that fall on those numbers rather than celebrate them. Indifference to a birthday, in other words, isn't always a personal psychological quirk. Sometimes it's a completely rational response to a cultural calendar that never treated every birthday as equally significant in the first place. The Western habit of celebrating every single year with the same enthusiasm is, historically speaking, the unusual choice, not the default one. And this is where it loops back to something much bigger than birthdays. Every culture in history has needed some ritual to mark the passage of time, because without one, time slips by unmarked and unprocessed. Ancient societies used harvests, solstices, rites of passage, shared New Years. Modern life, at least in much of the West, shrank all of that down into a single yearly date with a cake on it, applied uniformly, expected uniformly, regardless of whether it actually means anything to the person living it. When someone opts out of that ritual, they aren't opting out of time. They can't. Nobody can. They're just choosing not to look directly at it, the same way you might glance away from something too bright to stare at comfortably. Think about that the next time your birthday comes around or someone else's does. The candles, the singing, the slightly awkward attention, none of it is really about turning a year older. It's a controlled, culturally approved moment to stare straight at the one fact your brain spends all year quietly working to avoid. Some people lean into that moment, using the noise and the cake and the attention as proof of life, proof of connection, proof that the buffer is holding. Some people flinch and look away, quietly protecting themselves from a spotlight that feels less like celebration and more like exposure. Both are just different strategies for carrying the same weight. And maybe that's the real reason this behavior is so easy to misread from the outside. A muted birthday looks like apathy, but apathy and armor look identical from a distance, and only one of them is actually empty. So somewhere right now, someone is turning off notifications on their birthday, letting the calls go to voicemail, leaving the group chat unopened. It was never really about the day. It was about how loudly that day makes the passing of time impossible to ignore.